lack of agency. And how does that work? Well, to be a man and to care for yourself, why it's so important right now is because we're confronted with isolation. This is what combat trauma tends to do, and any kind of deep trauma tends to do to a person, is recoil from the environment, protect yourself. Depression is actually a defense mechanism, and it's actually a useful one. If you take a look at the primal mind, we're going to withdraw, we're going to assess, we're going to protect, and we're going to slow down all operations. Okay, good. We have nowhere to go except stay in this cave and be safe. All right, isolation eventually develops into, there's only one thing inside of this circuit loop, and that's my thoughts, and they cycle. So the three things that I've realized that help men, that have helped me, is to, one, seek out healing. I mean, Michael Jordan, $1 million athlete. He's got a bad knee. He's going to take the season off, or at least several games, to heal it. When it comes to the mind, when it comes to the amygdala, when it comes to the swollen part of a hypervigilant brain that is used to protecting itself and its other friends or people that he values or she values, but especially for the man, it's a masculine act. I'm going to defend. I'm going to fight. But inside of that, I'm losing all of my frontal cortex here. And if I live in that, and I think that a lot of veterans and a lot of traumatized men, they are affirmed in this state, but yet they never get to go back to, how do I feel vulnerable? And some of the best things I've ever felt, I was actually in an AA meeting 2 nights ago with a bunch of veterans. And that healing that they sought, there was Marines polishing their boots and getting close to crying because they've almost lost everything to alcohol. And that's vulnerability. These are men that have shoulders bigger than I ever will, and they're probably still carrying guns and doing what they need to do. And they're stepping into a space where they could say, I need to healing, I need inclusion, I need to be recognized, I need to be vulnerable, I need to know I'm not alone. And these are not tenets that we heard from at least John Wayne. I mean, you leave the chin strap off, you run into the fire, you pull somebody out. It was you and you alone. You were John Rambo that day. You were Steven Seagal, however it worked, but you did it on your own. You pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. And I think that's a false sell. I think, and I don't mean to get into politics, but I will, because that's why I said it. I think men are yearning for someone to follow and to lead. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the leaders in my country, in America, are falsely propagating an idea of winners are the only people worth paying attention to. And I'll tell you what, if that's the case, that's wrong. I think I saw it on one of my wife's little folders she got for free at Columbia. It says, it's not win or lose, it's win or learn. And the biggest battle I've fought, and the thing that's brought me to the brink of suicide over more than I could put my hand on, that I've realized, is I expected something out of myself that was from that false self, from that archetype that said, I don't need care, I don't need inclusion, I don't need healing, and I don't need vulnerability. I just got to suck it up, drive on, drink water. And if I can't handle that, I'm not worth it. So the one thing I would say is, now that I've said a whole lot, is that what is important for men right now is to really assess truly what they need. If you're getting into a fight with your friends, your boss, your dog, your wife, anger is a secondary emotion. If you're angry about something, guess what? You're probably crying inside because you need something. So you're either hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And if those basic needs are met, if you're not hungry, you're not angry, you're not lonely, you're not tired, how are you not being served? And if you are being served, then that means there's a deep desire inside of yourself to serve. And that's the last, is healing, inclusion, vulnerability, and service, or mission. And if you don't have a mission to where you feel like you're a valid contributor, I heard something really poignant the other day, is to build self-esteem, you need to do esteemable acts. And to feel esteem for oneself, you need to feel valid. And I really think those are the things that men need right now, is if all your basic needs are met, and if you're upset, or you're feeling suicidal, or if you're feeling confused, or you're just lacking something, then you need to give something back. And if you can't give something back, you need to accept the healing to yourself. So that's really all I think. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Frank. I think you touched on something which would be an interesting thing I would love to hear from Bob and Marshall on as well, is emotions and men. This is a common theme, that aggression and anger are safe spaces. And I see a lot of men suffering with that. And I think what you said is so important about vulnerability. I would love to hear what Marshall and Frank, I'm sorry, Marshall and Robert have to say too about handling and balancing emotions.
Well, I think, and thanks so much, Frank, for sharing those words, man. You hit upon so many poignant things there, and so many things I can identify with at the moment. Even me personally, repairing my relationship to the feminine. Similar situation. You're growing up in this environment, male-dominated household, male-dominated society, male-dominated schooling, and it can really distort your image of everything. And anyway, on emotions, I think just basically as well, what we've got to start to understand is that the emotions and feelings that come through our system, it's number one, just information. And what happens is we don't give ourselves permission to feel those feelings. We're very good at putting things in boxes. We're very good at compartmentalizing things. And we're very good as well of attaching a mental story to whatever it is that we're feeling. So if we do feel a sense of guilt or shame or whatever it is, the mind will say, that's bad. Like, that's bad. That's wrong. You can't do that. And then that's when we fall into this perpetual cycle of, these habits of self, and it reinforces these things that are just screaming to be felt, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, to be grown from. So these information that's coming through the system, from my perspective, because life is always going to challenge you, right? It's not designed to make you happy, in the words of Eckhart Tolle. I remember sitting in this small group at NYU a couple of years ago, and he would say, life is not meant to make you happy. It's meant to challenge you. And it's learning how to ride the waves of challenge that you almost like find your happiness, because you start to work with the rhythm and the dance of life, that it is these ebbs and flows. So coming back to emotions, for me personally, why I've found meditation in particular to be so powerful and such a powerful tool is because it gives me a natural container where I can drop out of my head and learn to come back to this conscious state of awareness, where I can begin to witness what is coming through my system and what it is that I'm giving attention to, or what within me needs to uncoil or unravel, or bring some light to the dark, so to speak. So I think as men, like, and I'm only going to speak from personal experience, for so long in my life, I repressed every single emotion after the suicide of my own brother when I was 20. And that was like a 10, 12-year cycle of putting emotions in a box, suppressing, to Frank's point, not seeking help, thinking I could do it on my own because that's what men did. They sucked it up. And you don't cry, you don't do, you're a soldier. Even if you're not in the military, you're a soldier as a civilian. And it's just it's so obvious that when I just gave myself permission to ask for help, put my hand up, things changed in a matter of months and a year. Like, I just thought to myself, why couldn't I have done this 12, 15 years ago? And it was like this, like, just beautiful opening. All of a sudden I could breathe. There was a space where I could just be who I am as I am. And that was enough. Feeling whatever it is that I felt, a lot of shame, a lot of isolation from self, a lot of blame, a lot of guilt, a lot of anger, a lot of wanting to point the finger at so many people. And when I was given permission for myself and with the help of others to just open that container, not only was there a homecoming of coming back to what I understood to be the real me, I learned to engage with life in a completely different way. It was like putting on a pair of glasses I never knew I needed. It was like everything came into sharp focus. And as a man, I started to feel more whole. I understood the feminine aspect, to Bob's point earlier, that I wasn't just this fixed position of male and this distorted view I had of what it meant to be a man. All of a sudden, I was like the whole. I became more balanced. And even though right now I'm even still working on repairing my relationship to the feminine, because has caused issues in my relationships to date. And finally, I've put my hand up and I'm actually seeing a therapist. You know, even the coaches, even the spiritual healers have their own healers and coaches. And I'm not afraid to put my hand up with this. But seeing this relationship therapist has done wonders for our relationship. And where I have gone wrong in previous relationships, I think this will succeed. I think this is going to turn out to be the quote unquote fairy tale story. So that's what I wanted to open up. That's what's coming to me in the moment to your question, Jen. I just think these emotions, we label them as good or bad when in the end of the day, it's just information passing through the system. And, you know, it's either passing through the system in love and wisdom or fear and self-doubt, but that also contributes to how we perceive the information that's coming through and whether we accept the invitation to look at these in order to help us grow, perceive differently, and understand ourselves at a deeper level.
So I'd like to kind of pick up on some themes that I kind of hear both in Marshall and Frank. Tell you just a little quick autobiographical note is that, you know, from the time that I was a teenager, I've been involved in martial arts. And, you know, you think of that as like a real guy's thing. Somewhere along the way, I got interested in healing. So, you know, here you got these two sides, fighting and healing. And when I got interested in healing, I have to say that what captured my interest was the magic part of it. You know, I think about back to my Comanche grandpa, who his technique of doctoring was to take a red hot coal and put it in his mouth to activate his power to heal another person. And I was like, yeah, that's, you know, that's it right there. That's the magic right there. And as far as emotions are concerned, you know, through that part of my life, I thought of human emotion as being an enemy. I thought of it as an enemy to my spiritual progress, because I thought if you were part of that roller coaster of up and down of emotions, that it was a way of pointing out that you really hadn't accomplished much spiritually, because emotions were like a separate box. Emotions were something that somebody who is not evolved is controlled by their emotions. So the emotions became to me to be an enemy. You know, you certainly didn't want it when you were fighting on a mat with somebody in a martial arts contest. And like I said, in the healing part, I didn't, you know, wasn't looking at emotions. It was all about the magic. It was all about the power. When things started to change for me was in the sweat lodge, because in the sweat lodge, you have intense heat that starts to cause alterations in consciousness. And through that, your emotions are very often triggered and very often brought up. So in the North American Indian sweat lodges that I was taking part in, I found men who would break down and they would cry. And I was thinking to myself, well, this is, you know, this is interesting. This is something here. I got to be involved in the Native American church, the peyote religion of the Southern Plains tribes. And again, in these intense moments, I see men cry in there without shame. They get in touch with something, and through these emotions, they heal. And then I started training in curanderismo and using the temazcal and using the plática, the heart-to-heart talk that leads to the limpia or spiritual cleansing. And in that system, the way that we look at it is that our emotions give us the opportunity for healing. And I realized that, all that magic, all that power, it has its place, but what you're really dealing with in the trenches is the emotions, the strength of the emotions, acknowledging them, channeling them, letting them pass through you, and ultimately transmuting them. And that's what we do inside the temazcal. We use the heat, we use the community to get beyond our normal limitations. I had a dad, an adopted father. His name was Fred Parton, and he was the one who took me into the Native American church that takes place inside the teepee. And what he said one time was, he was in a teepee and he looked around at everybody during the ceremony and he said, there is not one of us in here who's perfect. He said, but we're here for each other so that when one of us falls down, the rest of us are here to pick that man up. And that's what I think it is to be a man. That's what I think it is to be vulnerable. That's what I think it is to have the capacity to heal, to use our own compassion, our own intentionality, our own vulnerability, and to put everything that we have into the concern that we have for the people around us. That's how I see what healing is.
Thank you so much. I would love now if each of you could share with everyone who's listening something they can take for their own practice, a method, a tool, something that you do personally, or something that you just think in general can really support. So whoever wants to go first, that would be great. Thank you.
I'll go if nobody else wants to go. You want me to start?
Sure, that'd be great.
All right. So what I was thinking that I would do is explain the directions and what the directions have to do with male and female energy, and then call in the spirit of the directions. Is that okay?
Beautiful.
Okay. All right, very good. So first, let me go to the ancient Mexica cosmology. And what they say was that there was a time where there was an undifferentiated oneness that made up all of the universe called Se. Now, Se at one time divided up into the two, the male and the female. Ometecutli and Omecihuat became the first couple. Ometecutli, the man, Omecihuat was the woman. And the two of them gave birth to 4 sons that we know as the directions, east, west, north, and south. So their 4 sons became the guardians of those directions. So what we do when we pray, when we want to agree with somebody, we use the word ometeot. And what it literally means is 2 energies. It's acknowledging the male and the female and the day and the night. And I think of it as a way of us calling out to everything that is. And it was that sexual bifurcation that created everything in this manifest world. So when we want balance in our lives, we want to be in touch, in harmony with the ometeot. And when we say ometeot, we're calling out to that fundamental awareness within ourselves. and the connection to everything that is. So in ceremony, we address the four directions. We invite their spirit to be here with us. And we call in our own male and female energies when we say the word ometeot. So as far as a daily practice goes, constructing an altar, which is beyond the scope of this presentation tonight, but you ask me what I do. So I have an altar that is dedicated to the oneness, the male, the female energies, the four elements, the four directions, and the four guardians of those directions. So what I'd like to do is, even though we're doing it on Zoom, the way that I look at it is we are all linked together energetically, everybody who's here. So the three of us who are presenters and Jennifer, we're connected to everybody who's out there listening tonight, wherever you are. What I would suggest that we do is that we create an energetic circle that connects each and every one of us. And I invite all of you to actually stand up with me and call in these directions. So I'll explain a little bit about what I'm doing here real quick. What I have, this is a charcoal tablet, which I'm gonna light to light up my copal. Copal is a type of tree from Mexico. And the copal tree, if you keep the resin from it, that resin creates a smoke when it touches this heat. So I'm going to put this in something called a popushkomit, which is what I have here. And there is a male popushkomit and a female popushkomit. I actually have a female one tonight, so we'll honor that part of our, as I said, men have an element of the feminine, women have an element of the masculine. So tonight I'll use this popushkomit. I'm going to put copal on it in just a second, and that'll create the smoke. And then I'm going to ask everybody to actually stand up and to face the directions with me as I call in the spirit of these four brothers. And we can think of them as aspects of ourselves. They represent the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And I invite you to join me in this energetic circle that we have to call in the spirit of these four brothers. We begin facing the east. And so we turn our attention to the direction of the east, the direction of beginnings, the direction of the guardian Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl, that brother who is part snake and part bird, the plumed serpent that reminds us that in our spiritual evolution, we begin here on earth, but we develop the ability through action to be able to take flight. And so Quetzalcoatl, we turn our attention to you at this beginning time. We ask you to be a part of what we do here tonight. We ask you to be present with us. We ask for your permission to ceremony, and we offer up to you the smoke of copal. If anybody out there has a drum or a rattle, any sacred sounds as well. And then with me, you can say the word ometeot to close this. Ometeot. Now we turn to our left, and we turn till we face towards the west. The direction of the brother known as Xipe Totec, the flayed skin. The reminder that we as human beings shed an old part of ourself in the same way that a snake sheds its skin through our personal sacrifice that we make as men. That we get rid of the old in order to bring in the new. We thank you, Xipe Totec, for this teaching. We ask you to be a part of this sacred ceremony tonight. We ask your permission for ceremony and ask for your presence here tonight. We offer up to you this smoke of copal. Ometeot. Now we turn to our left until we face towards the north, the direction of Tezcatlipoca, the smoky mirror, the ancestral wisdom, but also the dark part within ourselves, the part that we as human beings often try to hide, but the part that illuminates some aspect of who we are within our challenges and within the darkest part of ourselves. Tezcatlipoca is the smoky mirror that reveals this side to ourselves. And so to this brother, we offer up the smoke of Copal. We ask your permission, we ask for your presence in all that we do. Ometeot. Now we turn to the left until we face towards the direction of the south, the direction of Huitzilopochtli, the divine hummingbird, the warrior, that tiny bird that represents the entire Mexica nation. That little bird is a warrior because he's able to do the impossible. A hummingbird shouldn't even be able to fly, but somehow it does through the tenacity of sheer human will. And that's the part that we turn our attention to now. To you, Huitzilopochtli, we ask you for your presence, for your energy, for everything that you do to be able to give men the capacity to go beyond their immediate limitations and to be able to do what appears to be impossible. And so Huitzilopochtli, we offer up to you the smoke of Copal. We thank you for your presence here. Ometeot. Now we turn our attention to the sky, toward Tonatiuh, the sun up above. Tonatiuh, in my way of looking at things, also includes everything up above, including our Creator. And so, Creator, we ask your permission to perform ceremony tonight. We ask for your sacred presence in everything that we do. And so to you, Creator, we offer up this smoke of Copal. Ometeot. Now we turn in a complete 360-degree circle. We come down to the floor or the ground and touch Mother Earth. And Mother Earth, the sacred feminine of everything that is in this manifest world, we apologize to you for the many ways that human beings have caused harm to you. We apologize to you, and as men, we respect you in the deepest way that we know how, acknowledging that we have an aspect of that feminine within ourselves. And so, we as men commit to the protection of this earth that we depend upon for our life itself. And we thank you, Sacred Mother, and offer up to you this smoke of Copal. Ometeot. Now we stand, we cross our wrists at our heart level, and finally we turn our attention to Corazon, our own individual heart, as well as the heart of humanity and the heart of this entire universe. So, Sacred Heart within, through love, let us be connected to all of humanity, acknowledging the only race that there is in humanity, which is the human race, because red blood pumps through the veins of all of us as human beings. And so we ask to be connected with one another, that our actions be guided by this connectedness to everything that is. So heart within our own chest, heart within humanity, and heart within all of this universe. We offer up to you the smoke of Copal, and we say thank you. Ometeot. And so it is my prayer in closing this part of the ceremony that I've led, that all of the men that are out there who are looking for something spiritual, to have an understanding that there is a sacredness to that male part of ourselves. that we are part of a creation that's bigger than us, that we are an admixture of male and female energies, and that this male energy within us is something to be embraced and something to be utilized in a positive, constructive way, while we also acknowledge the feminine aspect within ourselves that gives us the balance that we know as ometeot. So I offer up that prayer on behalf of all of the men and all of their families and all of the women who are gathered here tonight. Ometeot.
Thank you, Bob, for your words, for your prayer. And in a way, it was right that you would open because now our hearts are open.
Beautiful.
And so I thank you. And so with that, I would love to just also hear the different practices also from Marshall or Frank. We're on a continuum.
You want to go, Frank?
If you would like me to first, it's your call.
I feel like I haven't heard your voice, your sweet voice, in about 30 minutes. The
You've
floor
got
is yours.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Robert. That was needed. I think that speaks to, I think, why a lot of we speak of men. I think that's why a lot of men, and I can say myself included, sought out something greater than themselves in the services. We looked for an initiation ritual and a way to give service to something greater than ourselves in a worldview. But that in the Western world, we're so individualized, at least the Western colonizing essence that's here right now outside of the indigenous persons, that we're yearning for that initiation ceremony and brotherhood. So thank you. And as it goes for my own practice, I think I find that with going on nature walks with the vets. I find it in community, in a yoga room. I think I find it in just simply going out on my own into nature and understanding there doesn't need to be any understanding. There just needs to be a presence and a state of being. And if we're stuck in an urban environment, or really kind of just stuck in our own homes, I think the one thing that always helps me is just, I think Marshall mentioned it, and I learned it early on in 2005. I remember there was guys and gals that were coming home and they were having trauma encoded in their body. There's this, I brought the book, Bessel van der Kolk. If you haven't read him, he's an amazing dude. And he essentially speaks about the things that the indigenous persons have known all this time, and people of the East, that trauma and confusion are encoded not just in our heads, but in our body. So what I do is through bodily movement, through bilateral stimulation of just being mindfully walking. I went for a walk this morning at 4 a.m. because I heard the garbage trucks coming and I didn't move my car. And I moved my car and I went, wait a minute, here's an opportunity to just be by myself and understand, what do I need? And that's the therapy that my therapist and I work with, is bilateral stimulation. And a lot of times things get encoded incorrectly in our bodies. When I get tense, my right shoulder goes up. So an opportunity for you, whoever is listening out here and whoever may share this conversation with men, if you see somebody gripping their hand, if you see somebody like needing to like rub their face, hey, great. Don't make fun of them. If you notice it in your own body, ask yourself why. Where does it come from? A lot of times these roots will come from a closer relationship with a coping skill, or a need to deal with a trauma early. And that's what gives you agency. You know, I used to grip my rosary in my pocket. You know, it would make me feel safe. But why? Why does that trauma stay in this hand? Or why does it go to the shoulder? And to ask those questions of yourself while you're walking in the woods, or even sitting in meditation. Give yourself 5 minutes a day. Start with 5 in the morning and 5 at night. I think Marshall mentioned that. That is an amazing space that even if and play. I think the problem in a lot of, I can speak for myself as a man, is we're afraid to play. And Marshall pointed that out beautifully, is we're either doing things out of love or out of fear. And if you ask yourself that question, if you're doing it out of love, then you have room for creativity. If you're doing it out of fear, just imagine, yeah, you can still see the room, but the blinders are on and tight. And that's okay. Just all voices are welcome. So that's the other thing, is I think a lot of times the trauma that I helped encode into my body was my inability to accept my shadow self, was my inability to accept the fact that, yes, I am doing violence upon myself. I may be doing violence upon someone else. I want the world to think I'm a great dude. So I think the Sufis have a great tradition. At the end of the day, they go through a full assessment of what they did well in the light of what Allah would want, and what they did for themselves. So it wasn't good or bad. Some Sufis would say good or bad, but the original Sufis, like Al Rabia, she was an amazing female Sufi. Look her up. She was a rock star, and she sat at home, and her main goal was to just cut through herself, but admit herself, understand herself, and then go, how do I fall more in love with my God? And however you call God, even if you don't have a God, but a best self, how do you become more in line with yourself and get out of your own way? At the end of the day, doing that and then stacking on a gratitude list and then going, holy crap, I have a roof over my head. I had a can of Coke today. That's pretty tasty. You know, whatever it is, even if you had a minute to yourself, something that the rest of the world would judge as a not so healthy coping skill, that societally, like, hey, you know, I took 5 minutes and had a smoke today. Great, you didn't quit smoking yet, but you took 5 minutes for yourself. Okay, right on. You know, in the native tradition, sacred tobacco is part of ceremony all the time. So it's not bad. It's just, it's moved into a place where moderation and respecting the sacred is put in place for something else. So just really quick, I said a lot, but the things that I do is, am I doing out of love or fear? That doesn't hurt anybody. You know what I mean? People that have done things out of fear have usually done things that were violent. If I did things out of love and it still had to be destructive or violent, at least I knew I was protecting the people I love. And that didn't encode a trauma as deeply. So if I'm getting angry and I know I need to take action, some kind of kinetic, you know, back when I was in the military, if I was doing it because I loved my friends instead of I hated the enemy, however that plays out, but that conversation was in my head, I didn't feel bad. I knew I did my best, and I went as far as I needed to because I was tempered and guided by love, not by fury. And yeah, the world is a frustrating place. So those two things are really great guideposts. The other thing, like military stuff, like a foxhole. I mean, World War I, you can always improve your foxhole. I mean, it's great. You're stuck in your house. Nothing's happening. You have zero agency. But you can always improve your foxhole. That was the thing they taught me in the military. I'm like, awesome. And then there was another great author. He said, affect change in your meter zone, basically your arm's length. So I don't go on social media all that much anymore. I try to stay away from the news. That's their story, as our teacher Ron Young says. That's not my story. It is my story. I do have responsibility to my fellow man, but if I can't care for myself and I can't control as best as I can what's in my meter zone or in my arms and legs reach range, then I can't help the rest of the world. The other thing that I learned in the military is, like, when you're shooting, you need to breathe. Breath is key. And we took that off of 5,000 years of yoga, and how many other 1,000 years we weaponized breathing for cadences and shooting. And the one thing I had to relearn is, and Jennifer asked me earlier, is like, how do you go from experiencing life in combat to going on nature walks and learning how to meditate? Well, guess what? The United States military, at least, I don't know what other militaries were doing, but they taught us how to sing in the cadence, to carry through the trauma, to carry through with bilateral stimulation, with breath, and with song and engaging my vagus nerve. All this science they did to me in basic training. Am I angry about it? Yeah, it was for a little bit. You kind of brainwashed me and did some tricks to make me do stuff that I wouldn't normally do. But I'm taking it back. And I would say encourage the men and those who love men in this thing is take back your breath. Learn yoga, learn breath work. And accept your wobble zone. So when you're shooting your rifle, it's always going to wobble. It's not always going to hit the target. And that's okay. And that's the beauty of a practice, whatever it be, your spiritual practice. Understand it's practice, not perfection. And accept your wobble zone. And lastly, it's just understanding your greater interconnectedness. Unfortunately, people are being asked to pick sides. Families are being divided. We're realizing we really haven't moved past our tribal affinities. We think we can think globally, but we can only feel tribally. And that's okay. But I think the best part about going on a nature walk and taking time to be vulnerable or just be silent is to realize, other than like, and I was very skeptical at first, like, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to become a tree hugger. Understand the beauty of nature. Understand that that tree outside that the city planted, it drinks thousands of gallons of water and it doesn't make a sound. You find me a sump pump that doesn't make a sound and naturally grew from a tiny seed and pumps thousands of water in it, exhales oxygen, inhales carbon dioxide, and has a diffuse network of fungi that talks to other trees and keeps even cut down. Secret Life of Trees, read it, it'll freak you out. If you can understand the beauty of being and interconnectedness, you won't care who's Democrat, Republican, conservative, this, you'll feel it, but you can step back and go, wait, I am still a being in this world. I'm just a being and I have a finite amount of time here. And if I shed those labels, I'll just remember, oh, if I want to be loved, I should love other beings too. And that's reciprocity. And that's simple. So just as Marshall started it in a lot of ways, coming back to the basics, we're trying to do too much with too little. And I think men tend to not want to go back to that 0 point. In the military, we always break out the soldier's common task manual. And it teaches us to high crawl, low crawl, and 3 to 5 second rush, and how to make a phone call and how to kind of shoot okay. And we do that every year. If you're a sergeant major or a general, you all have to do it. And so why do we have to be so proud is to pretend that we're on such a high level that we can't simply go back to, what is it like to reclaim my breath? What is it like to understand how I feel right now and why I might be feeling awkward? What is it like, especially for me in recovery with alcohol? Why do I want to drink? It's just information. So feelings aren't facts. So why is it? And then to come back to that basic level of asking the childlike questions of like, well, why am I doing it? And when you figure that out and you're grateful, even in your silly moments, and you affect change as far as you can, and you do a little body movement, and you feel out where the stress is and the trauma, and you give it a little love and give yourself permission, as Marshall says, I think those are the things that keep me stable. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing all that, man. Love the nature piece, those little things. And Bob, look who I found in the south corner of my room. A little small bird just hanging out. I don't know if it's a hummingbird, but some kind of bluebird on a little piece of wood. I'm just going to leave you with one simple practice because there is, a lot, but time permitting, and that is simply just the act of and the power of prayer. Now, when I say prayer, you don't have to go to any type of religion. The specific prayer that I'm going to just teach you and what works for me in terms of opening up my energetic structure, in terms of opening up my heart. If you do have a connection to something that is greater, choose your own language there, even more potent. But even if it's just a connection to your heart space, and it's just simply the repetition of the word, thank you. So what I'll do is I'll go to a private space in my home. Typically it's at my desk. For people that have families and kids and maybe really super busy, maybe the bathroom. And I will repeat the words thank you with as much intensity as possible. First of all, I'll just pick one thing and I'll go into the specificity of that one thing, and I'll find the feeling of what it is that I'm deeply grateful for and appreciative of. So, for example, I may start the fact that I am deeply grateful for my partner. When she comes in the door, it puts a smile on my face. I love the way she smells. Well, then the fact that we'll sit down and have a meal together. I'll get into the specifics of what it is that I'm grateful for. I won't bypass anything, because with gratitude and appreciation, it's very easy just to tick lists of things. So I'll move into a feeling first of specificity with what I'm grateful for. And then I'll move into the resonance, the vibration of gratitude by just saying thank you over and over and over again. If I want to call in conjunction with that thank you, along with the connection in my heart of whatever is your access to deity is, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, do that. And then I'll start to, as I amplify this thank you, I'll start to say thank you for everything. So it's just, could be thank you for all the challenges in my life right now. Thank you for the suffering that I've experienced to date and how I'm learning each and every day. Thank you for this, that, and the other. Continue this thread of thank you, but just constant. You're just repeating thank you over and over again. And you're allowing the intensity and the gratitude, the frequency of gratitude, just to start building like a little sun within you. And if you want to add imagery to it, add a golden light that you feel like is enveloping you or wrapping you around like a big warm hug. The reason why I love this practice is it can take me from a really shit mood in the morning and change things in an instant within 5, 6, 7 minutes. And simply by the act of closing my eyes, repeating thank you over and over again, starting with specificity, and then moving into whatever it is that comes forth. You don't have to search for these things. Allow whatever is coming forth to come forth. Use imagery, say it out loud, and move into the feeling. Even if you can't see the images, find the feeling. Find the feeling, amplify the feeling, and use that to open up your heart. Very simple practice, but I can tell you it has potency, and it can change your morning, your day, your afternoon, your evening. And I'm just going to leave you with that simple practice with that.
I thank you all for that. They're all beautiful and they're all accessible, I feel. So people that can really help people. And I think everybody who's here either supporting the men in their life or their men seeking different strategies and tools, that this is something that we can pass along and share. And so I really thank you for those tools you just shared with us. So I'd love to open it up for questions. If anyone who's listening has a question, you can ask a question in the chat, or you can put it in the Q&A, and I will happily relay those questions onto our panelists here. And that usually takes a minute or so for those questions to come in. So in the meantime, something that came to mind when you were speaking, I'd like to ask you just to kick off the questions is, how can your partners of men, allies of men, support other men? Because some are present here today in that capacity to learn ways. And it's one thing to say, okay, I've heard this method, I think you should try it. And sometimes there could be some resistance with that. So I'm just curious on what you would think would be maybe a way for those that want to support their brothers, their fathers, their grandfathers, their friends, their partners, maybe how we can do that.
Something just came to mind. So instead of, and these days, not many people are going to the pub or going to hang out in public places because they're all either shut down or there's restrictions. But one of the things I've done with a couple of my mates is things that we would normally do, Like whether it is go get some food or sit in the pub. I never drink anyway, but I'll sit there with my lemon, lime, and bitters and have a chat. But what we've done instead is, to Frank's point, we'll get out in nature. And what I have found is that when we're in nature, the conversation kind of moves in a direction. And I'm always good at planting seeds because I always like to just start to open my friends up to think a little differently sometimes. But it happens naturally when we're in nature that the conversation just, there's like a softness, a calmness, a realness where like you're in a container where levels of truth can start to slowly come out by themselves. So don't be afraid to say to your friend that you normally go to the pub with, or you normally go to the gym with, or whatever, to try something different. So in my experience, even the last couple of months, I've had some really amazing conversations, real conversations that have been deeply therapeutic and healing for myself and the person I'm with, by doing something different and you having the courage to perhaps ask a question that you may not ask in front of other people or down at the pub. And you will be surprised. So the word I'm thinking of, is courage. But that was trying to mix it up with how you're engaging with friends. And that's the same with family as well, with family rituals and routines. If you want different results, you got to do different things, right? That's all I got to say.
So I'll kind of pick up on what Marshall was talking about, and that is that the context of the conversation, I think, is really important. And for me, fire is the place where we hold these conversations, where I hold conversations with other men, because usually when we're keeping a sacred fire, somehow it's the men who are there. I think of fire as being a very male element. Not that there aren't women who keep fire for certain ceremonies, but in my experience, it's usually me with other men. And being in that environment seems to be a container for holding the kind of conversation that I think you're asking about, Jennifer. That there's a time and there's a place, and somehow within the responsibility to keep the fire for everybody else and the time that you have to spend together, that it becomes a great place for those conversations. But it also is based on the idea that we can develop a relationship with the fire itself, with that element that has this ability to transform and transmute, to take one thing and change its state completely. And so, as men sitting around the fire, keeping the fire, being responsible for the fire, to me, that's the place to carry on the kind of conversations that you're talking about.
That's awesome. That's usually where all the conversations happen, at the end of the veteran retreats. It's always around a fire, and there's always a job for someone at the fire, and so it's always welcoming, it's always warm. So yeah, that's where a lot of our veterans, that's where it always ends, is around the fire. And I think as it goes for partners, there's an interesting psychology to men, and I think that goes hand in hand with fires, is because you're usually sitting shoulder to shoulder. As much as we'd love to say we love a good face-to-face, confrontational, or see the two boxers like this, it carries a message that's nonverbal. But when I think women are more comfortable, and people in a more feminine expression, I don't want to speak in full generalities, but people in a more feminine expression tend to be okay with face to face. Whereas I think people that are more masculine archetypically are afraid, and we won't admit it, But to sit side by side, I think that's why fishing and Werther's Originals commercials and Grandpa, and they're side by side. There's no boom here. We're looking at something together. And then inside of that context, like Robert said, can be the vulnerability. Because sometimes when I show my face, like this medium in its very essence, like when I even talk with my therapist, I realize I have to like cover my face doing Zoom because I can actually see my own real-time vulnerability. And we have these mirror neurons where I nod and you nod. So it's kind of, if you're going to talk to somebody about, hey, maybe it would be cool if you took a look at this new thing. Sometimes the setting and the approach, understanding how us male animals work, is a real good starting point. Do it shoulder to shoulder instead of face to face. Secondly, through the spiritual healing lens, if you do feel someone opening up to you and you may have a great suggestion that will help them step into a new space, reflective listening. So what I think I hear you saying, let me know, is this. And then that person can affirm. And then a lot of times, I mean, it may sound like I tell my wife, who's a social worker, I say, you're doing that motivational interview magic on me again. You're getting me to admit exactly what I need by leading the horse to the water. I'm like, all right, stop. I got it. I know I need to go do yoga. I know I'm stressed out. But in giving people space and affirming that loved one that, hey, I think I just heard you say you do need a little more physicality in your life. Or you might, I heard you say you might be open to meditation, or you might be open to trying something different. Is that right? And see where that goes. And if it's like, oh, heck no, then all right, you may have planted a seed, but it's respectful. And then the third thing I would say in starting those conversations is quietly knowing that you just sit there and nothing needs to happen. Even if you have the best advice in the world, just quietly ask yourself and say, can I come into your heart? You say it into your mind. And this is kind of a thing, like inviting your heart into someone else's heart, or inviting their heart into your heart. And even if nothing is said, I think at least a trust that hasn't been felt in that way because of the rhythms of the day and the need to do this and that, really just sitting. And even if you don't say it out loud, but say, I'm asking permission to enter into your heart space. I'm asking permission to be with you right now. And sometimes that's, I think, especially with men that are more challenged with being vulnerable or talking about how they feel straight up without like a beer or something, or whatever the prop is. We love props. I think just asking permission, and even overtly saying, hey, can I ask you a question about something that I heard you mentioning a lot? And once you ask permission, you'll be able to get the feedback, and that empowers the person to feel like they're on a level playing field. This isn't somebody coming down going, you drink a lot, dude. They're saying, can I ask you a question? Yeah. And then invite that space and see where it goes. And if it goes nowhere, cool. At least you hung out with somebody you love. So thanks.
That's great. We have about 5 minutes left or so. We actually do have a couple questions, so we'll have like a rapid fire round, I guess, just in the interest of time. Thank you so much for sharing that, though, because I feel like that's so important for us to know. And I learned something from all of your contributions to that question, so thank you. One of our attendees actually is circling back to you, Frank, about the book that you showed, The Body Keeps the Score. Oh yeah, he said it would be, actually it's a comment, not a question. It would be great if you can make it available on a list of favorite reading material. So I guess he's in agreement with you there on that. And another attendee said, thank you for the wisdom. In my experience, masculinity is related to leaving an impact. What would you say to a man anxious to hear about his legacy? What should our legacies be as a 21st century man? Any one of you, if you want to answer that.
Good question, Tatum. Good to have you on the call, man. So real quick, from my perspective, what should our legacies be as a 21st century man? I have the word legacy to me sometimes I feel this pressure around legacy, so that's where to say to a man anxious about his legacy, all that comes to mind and in my heart as I read that is, by you being authentically you and you sharing your innate gifts, your divine recipe of love that exists within you, that is bigger than you, that will automatically be in contribution to the whole, as well as deep, fulfilling, meaningful contribution to yourself. And whatever shines through as a manifestation of that gift or gifts that you're sharing with the world, there is, from my perspective, your legacy, because the impact that'll have on whatever community, family environment, or larger networks will, that's your job in terms of helping evolve consciousness, but also evolving your own soul's journey. So that's what came to me in the moment. Staying true to you always.
What I'd say about legacy is that the implication is that we have to, in order to have had a meaningful life, have an impact on the people that we leave behind. So the question that I would ask is, if I died today, what would people say about my life up until this point? What impact have I had so far in my life to the people who matter? And if I can't answer that question, maybe another one is, what kind of response would I want? What would I want people to say about my life in a eulogy, for example? If it were my funeral, what would I want people to say? And whatever I've done so far that has had an impact on other people, I would think of that as something that has organically and naturally come about as a result of my actions. And I would want to do more of those actions to make a difference to the people that I care about. And I think that's more important than building big monuments. The way that you treat people and the impact that makes on people's lives, just knowing that you care about them and knowing that you're willing to make sacrifices for other human beings. I think that's more important than building big buildings without leaving the kind of legacy that sometimes we think of as important, enduring objects. Instead, let's think about our legacy as creating change, positive change for the people around us.
I'm behind every single thing you both just said. Absolutely. Yeah. And affecting those who are already in your path, I think that is your legacy unfolding itself. So if you react to it with love, it's going to write itself. And it's probably all you really need.
Thank you for that. And there's just one last question, which is, if you could take one important, give one important thing about self-care for men for everyone to take away with, what would that be? I hope that was clear.
Conduct every single thing you do under the light of, if you do it well or you don't do it well, you're being compassionate to yourself. And I know, because I fail at it every day. But there's only one person that can show me the right amount of love and compassion. Look in the mirror, say, I see you, and I love you. And if you can do that while looking at yourself in the mirror, one, you'll find out how old you've gotten, and your beard is gray. And two, you'll have a reference point for what compassion looks like for yourself, and then you can give it to others.
Wow. I was basically going to say the same thing. Just beautiful, that self-compassion. I think, Frank, you hit it right on the head there, man. So one other last little thing I'll add to that. If you can ground yourself in the loop of life as much as possible, I think that can be helpful. And this comes back to this gratitude piece as well, knowing that your time here is very limited. We are spiritual beings having a very brief experience in a human body. We are designed to love by our nature. Yes, we can get pulled into what's going on around in the world. We'll get taken out 1,000 times a day. But as our teacher Ron would say, you have the opportunity to bring it back 1,000 times. So ground yourself, then it does end. Enjoy the time that you have some fun, be authentically you, unapologetically. And yeah, if you can look in the mirror each and every day and practice that self-compassion piece, you're going to do great things for not only your nervous system, your heart, but you'll start speaking to your soul.
And I'm going to kind of piggyback on everything that that Frank and Marshall said. I'm in complete agreement. What I would say is that there is a lot of pressure on us as men to do what everybody else expects of us. So the self-care comes in accepting what is in this moment. Whether I hit the mark that I was supposed to by somebody else's standards, whether I had a day where I accomplished the goals that I thought were important or I fell down on it, that I can accept myself and accept everything that's going on in the moment and acknowledge all of the emotions and the things that are passing through me in that moment, that I don't have to judge myself according to a set of criteria that somebody else set up for me. So self-care is taking the time to look at what is, to accept what is, and maybe even have a little fun now and then. I think that's really important. And I forget which one of you guys were talking about that before. I apologize, but I think that's really important too, is that getting so caught up in accomplishing and doing what you're supposed to do that men can forget to enjoy the moment as well. So that's my parting piece of advice.
Well, that's a perfect way to wrap up our circle. And I just want to thank all of our presenters for your time, for sharing your hearts and sharing your knowledge with everyone who's listening. And I'm so grateful to all of you for this experience, to learn from all of you. So, and I also wanted to thank all who attended, and we hope to see you again soon. And thank you. So have a beautiful evening, morning, wherever you are. And we'll see you next time. Take care. If you have any last words, you can write them in the chat, or panelists. Thank you so much.
I bet a big thank you to you, Jennifer, for organizing this again and caring about people within the community at these challenging times. So a big thank you to you.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you,
Thanks, Frank.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Stay well.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.